And the key to any successful company is having a system that everyone follows, right? And that's, for example, McDonald's. McDonald's isn't the best hamburger. My 10-year-old grandchild could go to the grocery store and buy some hamburger and a bun, and some condiments, and cook a better quality hamburger than you can get at McDonald's for less price. It's not about the quality of the hamburger. It's about the system, which includes convenience and price and location and the way you treat customers.
Climbing up is a struggle, tension in the air. But the underdog prevails, we here to declare. To the top or the mountain where champions stand. Failures can't break us, we taking command. Yeah, it's a journey, climb to the peak. Scaling businesses, who it ain't for the weak. Growth is the game, we play it real tall. From the bottom to the summit, we rise, never fall. Interview the legends, success stories told. Risepreneurs, hearts made of gold. Strategies unfold, in the struggle grace. Hardship and challenges, yeah, we still embrace.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Risepreneur podcast, the show dedicated to all the business owners and entrepreneurs who's looking to expand, grow, scale their businesses, and ultimately exit at the highest valuation. Today, we have a special guest, John Hewitt. He is the founder of he founded multiple companies. Currently he is a founder of Loyalty Brands, a group of franchise businesses. In addition, he is a franchise expert with over 50 years of experience. He wrote the book, I Compete. He exited one of his franchises with close to $500 million and then started another one in the same space, made it even more successful. So I look forward to pick his brain today and see how we can all benefit from his experience and his successes and mistakes that he did in the past. John, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm John Hewitt and founded two major national companies, and they say third time's a charm. I'm on the third time.
Third attempt. And the only first one you actually took public, right? The other two.
The first two, both I took Jackson Hewitt public and Liberty Tax public, and I sold them, and they both became worth about $500 million each.
Awesome. All right, so let's go straight in. Can we start with your journey? I got your book in the beginning stages. Whatever I read so far, it was impressive. I would love to share some of the things that stood out already with our audience and also take your perspective on it. So you shared there that your entrepreneurship actually started much earlier. You had the entrepreneurial spirit from being in a kindergarten age, and how you conducted yourself in school. You were not neutral. You would always speak up and challenge the higher authorities in their perspectives and their mistakes. Can you take us to that time? So what inspired you to be that way? Did it come from your father, a mother, or you just happened to be in that mindset?
Well, I've always had rebellious attitude, and I'm not sure where I have that, but always been argumentative. Always one thing that I'm not sure that many people feel this way, but whenever anyone says anything to me, I say, why isn't that true? My first thought isn't, oh yeah, I agree. My first thought is, why is that not true? So I'm always trying to question the ordinary, the common opinion. And as you said, as a result, in school, I had continual battle with my teachers because I would question and they didn't like it. Most teachers are uncomfortable being questioned. They felt like students should just accept what they say without any question. So I was a very rebellious child, and yet very successful.
So you were good with your studies, though, right? You were not at the okay, because a lot of personalities, like dominant personalities, usually get resentment and drop out of school, ultimately become entrepreneurs or deal with the law.
Yeah, the good news for me was that when I was in high school, I was in New York State, and all of the important classes had a statewide exam. And so it didn't matter what they graded you during the year. It only mattered what you got in that final grade. Even if they punished me a little during the year with less than appropriate grades, then by the end of the year, I did all right by the fact that I scored high on my tests. But I'll tell you one thing, even in college, when I was in college, the first year I was in pass fail English. And it was the only class I ever took in college that was pass fail. And I had a B average, and the teacher flunked me. She flunked me. And so the only time in my life I went to the dean of English and complained, and he called the teacher in, and then he called me back in and said, well, she's agreed that if you attend her class in the second half, the reason she failed you, he said, you didn't live up to your potential. You didn't work to your full potential. I said, it's pass fail. It's not pass fail against myself. It's pass fail compared to everyone else. She agreed that if I took the course in the second semester and just passed, then she would go back and retroactively pass. For Punisher, I never went to any class, not one class, and except for my tests, and passed. And so she had to retroactively pass. But that's the kind of reaction I got from even my English teacher. It's hard to argue with an English teacher.
So they always tried to put you to work within a box, and you would always rebel and do opposite.
Yeah, and speaking of that, one of my employees came to me one time, one of my executives, and he said, last night I had an epiphany. He said, speaking of box, he said, last night I had an epiphany. He said, you're always trying to get us to think outside the box. And we go outside the box and then we pop back in. He said, it just occurred to me, you're never in the box. So I've never lived in that box. When there was Kathleen Gifford wrote a book, and one of the chapters in her book was Age of Bliss. And it says that when you're up until you're 6, 7, 8 years, 9 years old, you think you can do anything. You can be Superman, Superwoman, President of the United States. You can be anything. You can be an astronaut. You can be Star Wars. You can do anything. And then everyone beats you down. She said, your teachers, your enemies, your friends, your parents, you can't do that. You'll never be able to do that. No, forget about that, honey. You can't do that. And she said, this book and this chapter said, you need to get it back to that age of bliss. And she was teaching adults to get back to that. And I realized at that point, when I heard that story, that I've never got out of that. I've lived in that age my whole life. They never beat it out. I've always been self-confident that I could achieve anything.
You got to have such a strong personality to withstand all that pressure, because it's not just in school, right? Like, it's anywhere you go, it's the same message, the same conditioning, the same influence to make you the follower, the whole education system, right? And one of the biggest challenges we experiencing now, employees just following instructions, anything that's a little off, it's very hard for them to come up with some creative, critical way to come up with a creative way to handle something, to put out the fire. So I guess it's an outcome of being in a box, and you were not compliant with that. Were you the oldest? Are you the oldest in the family?
I am the oldest. And you're right. One of my philosophies is that everyone in your life will try to bring you back to normal, make you mediocre. In a way, they don't like to see people that they don't understand that achieve great things. So everyone to be comfortable around you, everyone wants you to be like that. They don't get the mavericks and the adventurers. They don't get the Elon Musk and the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs. They're uncomfortable around the people that are the greatest inventors ever.
You're reminding me of the saying, somebody brought it to my attention, that when you go out there and you laugh, smile, people look at you like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong? why you're smiling, right? So
Right.
something has to be wrong for you to smile. But yes, going back, your father, you mentioned, was an entrepreneur and had entrepreneurial spirit. He was struggling. And in the book, you mentioned that something occurred while you were in college and you've been called to take over and manage 10 locations. So I understand that you already knew how to deal with the tax. And did you manage locations already? Like, how did such a big responsibility fall on your shoulders, and how did everybody accepted you being so young, out of college, all of a
Yeah.
sudden? Because right now, college maybe not as valued. Back then, college was a big thing. You had to be
Mhm.
a graduate. So somebody comes and tells us how to run things. I just wonder how that experience was for you.
Well, I've always been, and I'm not sure how this started, but I always remember myself as a leader. And even in the neighborhood gang, the neighborhood, and it wasn't a gang, but it was like, I'm talking 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Part of the reasons is I'm an only child for sure, but I was always very confident and the leader of the gang. And so what happened when I started working at H&R Block, I worked part-time evenings and weekends while I was attending the University of Buffalo. And in my second season, my manager went into the hospital and they thought he had a heart attack. Now, this is 1971. They hadn't invented anxiety attacks yet, but he just had anxiety attacks. So he was only, but they took him like 10 days or 2 weeks, but they thought he was going to be out, gone. And so they
Wow.
said, would you take over this district? They came to me and said, uh, would you take over? Would you leave school, leave college, and run this district of 10 offices? And I said, I talked to my parents and they said, go for it. So I did, and I loved it. And it was just incredible. It was a nice challenge. And looking back, I didn't have problems. Everyone that worked for me was older than me, right? And probably the average age of taxpayers back then was probably in mid-40s. Back
Double
in
your
the
age.
70s, today, the taxpayers tend to be the early retired. Back in the 70s, only 10 or 20% of the females worked. So most of my parents were females working while their children were in school. But I didn't have any problem getting their respect. I did a good job. And again, looking back, it seems a little incredulous that it was so easy for me to gain the respect of everyone. But what I learned in life is that if you always do what you say you're going to do, then you're going to get respect. And you can't, no one gives you respect. You have to earn respect. And
Mhm.
you earn respect by living up to what you say you do. That's integrity. People talk about honesty and integrity. To me, honesty is looking backwards, telling the truth about what happened before. Integrity is, if I make a commitment to you, if I'm going to do this by tomorrow or next week, that I'm fanatically committed to do that. Most people, great salespeople, tend to have no integrity. They don't have no intention of living up to their promises. But yeah, as long as you have integrity, you're going to get respect.
Awesome. When you went, let me rewind. Based on what you're describing, I'm just trying to figure out like what's more of your personality. The analogy is the composer creates music notes, right? And he passes it down to the conductor, shares it with their orchestra, make sure everybody follows the notes, the processes, right? And they have a nice presentation done by playing exactly what the composer had in mind. So, would you say because you were never in a box, always outside the box thinking, that you're more on the creative side and not necessarily like structured and details, following routines, because that's what puts you in the box. Would you position
Um,
yourself more on the conductor side or on the composer side?
you nailed me. I have zero detail. I'm just totally creative. Someone asked me recently, they said, when you're building a company, when you start with a handful of people and you're the only guy, And who's the first person you hire? And I said, well, it depends on your personality. It depends on your strengths and your weaknesses. And the first person you hire is someone that's good at your weaknesses. So I'm surrounded by detailed people because I'm zero attention to detail. And so I need people to do that for me.
So you're more of a visionary, dominance, direct, go get it, lead, push everybody forward. And you allow the integrators come in and compensate and support you on things that you're not necessarily excelling.
Exactly.
Probably don't even want to do because that's outside
Right.
of your nature.
Exactly.
So a lot of founders of businesses on that edge, and they try to also take the role of the integrator. Not everybody is, I guess, exposed to this early enough to understand what it's all about, and there's a struggle. They try to also be a conductor and not necessarily following through because those are their weaknesses, and they have a hard time gaining respect from their teammates for the consistency and everything else that the conductors would show strength for, right? So, how did you come to realize and also be able to read the personalities to understand that I need this person because this is who I am and he's going to compensate for what my weaknesses are?
Well, one of my favorite business authors is Peter Drucker. And he wrote one of my favorite books, and he wrote it's called The Effective Executive. And he said, people with great strengths have great weaknesses. And he tells a great story about Civil War and Abraham Lincoln. And the first two generals he hired were afraid to make a mistake. So they just sat and did nothing. And then he got Ulysses S. Grant, who just went. He went out and did it. And he won one and he lost one. And then he won two and lost one. And he was a go-getter. And so I've always been not afraid to make mistakes. And I've always realized that I have great weaknesses. And if you can face that, if you can understand that, then you're unstoppable. Many leaders I've seen are just afraid to admit weakness, afraid to admit error. And on the other hand, I pride my error. Like I can't cook. In my house, not only have I never turned on the stove, I've never turned on the burners on the stove. And I don't make no bones about it. I can't cook. My mother was a great artist. She could play music. She could pick up a musical instrument and play it without any music. She didn't know how to read music. She bought my ex-wife had an accordion, and she hadn't played it in 30 years or 20 years. And she put it for sale. My mother bought it and just started playing. And she could paint and sing, and I couldn't do anything. I can't even tell her in the lines. So one of the things you need to do if you're going to be exceptional and you're going to be able to lead other people, you have to admit your weaknesses.
Get humble. Interesting. But that's also your personality, right? Because you're not a follower, you're not within the box. The whole pressure of being within the box is a fear of making mistakes, right? There's a concept, it was transferred to you, you got to follow to the T. If you make a mistake, then you're not a good follower. So that kind of hits the ego.
And there's a book like that. There's a book like that I should have written. It's called Make Waves or Drown. Part of that, not following and staying in the box, is you don't want to offend anyone. And so the followers tend to be inoffensive. I'm brutally frank. I'm going to tell you, and even unfortunately, I can take it overboard that I'll meet a stranger and give them advice on how I think they should improve. And so not just the people that are close to me, but I have this fanatical obsession to make the world a better place. And so I'll even give advice on occasion to people that are strangers.
Mhm.
I'm not afraid. I don't need to be liked. I only need to be respected. I don't care if they like me. I only want to be respected.
Yeah.
It's great if they like me, which is rare, but I have hundreds of followers and I made 1,000 people millionaires. I have a lot of people that I've changed their lives. But again, I never try to get them to, I only demand that they respect.
So validation comes from respect, not being like, can possibly please everybody. What's right, you do your part, you accept it, you accept it. No, then it's not. You fine with that.
Right. My favorite Shakespeare is, this above all, to thine own self be true. You can't please everyone. And let me give you an example that I love to use, that I've had over 5,000 franchisees and helped over 5,000, 5,200 now. And you would think that there was something you could do that everyone would be happy. So I use this example. Let's say that I said to every franchisee, I'm going to give you $10,000. Well, how could anyone complain? Well, what would happen is the large franchisees who are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars of royalties, and you have the little franchise that's only paying 2,000 or 5,000 of royalties. So you got one guy paying $1 million and another guy paying 5,000. And the guy that's making $1 million says, I'm paying 20 times as much. He's paying $5,000. I'm paying $1 million. If you give him 10,000, you should give me 200. And the guy so he complains. And the guy making 5,000 says, well, wait a minute. That guy has a revenues of $7 million and a profit of 1.4 million. I'm losing money. I should have his $10,000. He doesn't need $10,000. Give me his $10,000. So you're never, ever going to please everyone. So you always, again, that's why I love, my favorite phrase is, to thine own self be true. Do the right thing.
Awesome. So basically, it's your reference point that dictates how you're going to translate what's happening. And it's your basically, based on that, you will making decisions, either complain or get satisfied. And you cannot possibly have the same reference point for everybody. So there's never going to be the same response. Cannot possibly please everyone.
That's exactly right.
Perfect. So the lesson I also got that for every founder, instead of trying to, yes, initially we all wear multiple hats, but be conscious of what hats are you wearing. Truly understand your strengths and your weaknesses, and see if you can delegate and surround yourself with people that would compensate for those weaknesses.
One of my favorite sayings too is that if both of us think the same, one of us is useless. You need people that are willing to speak up and not agree. The worst person you can have working for you is someone that always agrees with you. You need people like me. I need people like me that are bold enough to disagree with me. Again, if we both think the same, one of us is useless. And since I'm boss, I pick you.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm from former USSR, right? So people in the countries where the dictatorship rules, there's only one opinion, and everybody has to comply. And that only makes the leader fall and make mistakes, because everybody's agreeing and nobody's bringing to the attention of the leader certain critical things, because they're afraid of how the leader will react. So got to be able to speak up. Yeah, awesome. That's great. Can we?
So are you a good chess player since you're from USSR?
To tell you the truth, my kids taught me how to play chess a couple of years ago. I never touched the game for some reason. I like checkers, but not the chess.
I'm 1/4 Russian myself.
Yeah.
My dad's father was 100% Russian,
Oh, interesting.
and I am a very good chess player. So
Yeah.
I think back in the old days, 80 years ago, almost all the great players were Russian. Now they're worldwide. But back when Bobby Fischer came along in the 50s and 60s, all the great players in the world, like top 10, 7 or 8 of them, Russian.
But Bobby Fischer also had, I think, background from Russia, no?
No.
Russian Jews.
I don't remember his background, but
Interesting. Yeah, wow. Chess, it's amazing. I love and I do appreciate chess a lot right now, especially once I exposed myself more to entrepreneurship. Because at the end of the day, we have to have a business on a chessboard. And from there, you play, it's a basically intellectual game, sports game. That's the business, not poker where things hidden, you're making decisions based on the blind spots that you have. So everything has to be transparent, and you have to win it that way, right? Win on the paper first before you would go play the real business.
I love chess because there's no luck. It's the only game where there's no luck. In poker or I love bridge, but there's always a little luck, at least a little luck. But chess, there's no excuse. You have to make a mistake to lose.
Interesting. Awesome. Can we go back to your father? Every entrepreneur, hopefully, and has kids. I personally have 7 kids. I know you have 6, based on what I heard.
Mm.
So, your father influenced your decision to leave college and not climb corporate ladder because after college, that's what probably would happen. You actually went and started to manage multiple locations. So it threw you into entrepreneurship. So I'm seeing if I can push my kids to explore entrepreneurship, not necessarily become business owners, but just get that entrepreneurial spirit, mind, perspective to help them, whether they start the business or not. It helps with communication, with who you surround yourself, constantly growing, like respect growth mindset, not just to be okay with the plateau. So, how did father? Was it just at that time you went and ran it by him? You said that he was in a struggle to make it as an entrepreneur. He was able to share with you his opinion and you followed. You did not challenge. You were old enough to challenge, to say, hey, I see you struggle. It's not really tremendous success. You're succeeding in the corporate world. So why would I go and jump? Like how influence over you prevailed for you to make such a change?
Can I tell you, since you're trying to affect your children, can I tell you a story of how I got
Yes,
one of
please.
my children to take the journey you're trying to get?
Yes,
And then I'll go back to my father and his
yes,
struggle.
yes.
My oldest daughter was in school to be a marketing, and we were just starting to grow Jackson Hewitt into a national company. And so it came at the same time, and we were exploding from 6 states to 40 states one year. And she was a senior in college, and she is and was incredibly talented. And yet I would hear people ask her, are you going to work for your parents? And she would say, no way. And I could understand that. I was pretty tough. But one time she came in 2 minutes late at night, and I had a rule that you can't be late because I don't want to worry about you. You have to be home by midnight. You either call or you're home or you're going to get punished. And she came in 2 minutes after 12, and I grounded her for 2 days. I can understand her not wanting to work for me. So I tricked her. So what happened is she was going into her senior year. It's December. And of course, the tax season is January through April. And so I said, Patty, how would you like, listen to me for a minute. How would you like to take your last semester out of college and travel around the country teaching the Jackson Hewitt system? Wait, you're an expert. It'll look great on your resume. You have to promise to go back and get your degree next fall. And which is fine because she said, yes, I love that. I would love that. So it worked out perfect because she took the semester off. She traveled around the country teaching the Jackson Hewitt system and getting all kinds of accolades. She enjoyed the travel, enjoyed the job. Then the season worked out perfect because the season ended in April. Her mother was director of training. So she came into the training department between April and September when school started again. And she was great at training the new franchisees. And then she graduated in December. Well, that's perfect because January is tax season.
New season.
So she came to work for for Jackson Hewitt. And by the time she was 24 years old, she was the vice president of the company. We had an account with Walmart where we were in hundreds of Walmart stores. I put her in charge of that. She did an incredible job. And now that was 35 years ago. Now she has 12 great clip franchises, and she's semi-retired at 56. She runs 600 properties, like homes that she rents. So they were into flipping houses for a while. We buy ugly houses, and they own about 50 of them. and they managed another 550. So her and her husband came to be a franchisee at Jackson Hewitt. And then they sold that, and now they're doing that. So I tricked her. The only person I ever saw tricked her by using college to give her, why don't you try this? Look at it on your resume. And she fell for it, and it worked out perfect. But
Awesome.
back to my dad.
So we can basically come up with something where they will experience something hands-on, not try to get it intellectually
Yeah.
only.
They're not going to get it intellectually. You know what? I mean, one of the things when we started Liberty Tax, we had a costume character. We have a Lady Liberty that stands outside the office and dances and waves at passerbys in cars. And I don't know, people would come to training, and only half the people went back and instituted it because they thought maybe it's a good idea. But finally, I wasn't getting enough people that were implementing this great strategy. So what I made everyone do after that is, when you came to training, you had to put on the costume and you had to go out on the street and wave. And I asked hundreds of people over the years, did you see a difference? They said, yeah, everyone's smiling and honking. And you know what? 100% of the people went back and used the costume because they saw it works. Human beings are like me. They're to a lesser degree, they're resistant to learning from others. They need to learn the hard way.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing this. Amazing.
Sure. But back to my dad.
Father, yeah.
But yeah, my dad, his mother died when he was 13. His father died right after I was born, when he was about 20. And he grew up in the Depression. So he was poor. And I was born when he was at Michigan State. And he had 3 children before he left Michigan State, and another one born the next year. And so he didn't have it. He always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but he never got a chance, and because he couldn't afford to. And he was working hard, went to nice school, got his MBA, and eventually became a CFO of a public company. So after I'd been with Block for 12 years, he finally was ready. He had enough money, and all the kids were out of school, and he was ready to go. And so he bought the first Apple computer back in the 70s. And before there was such thing as an Apple store or anything, there weren't even 50,000 Apples in the country. And there was almost no such thing as a desktop. And he decided we should computerize taxes. So it took him about 6 months to convince me, because I was so happy and so successful at H&R Block. I was in my glory. But he finally convinced me, and in 1981, we built the first tax software for an Apple computer. And then ever since then, he was self-employed.
This is fascinating.
When I started Jackson Hewitt, he was the director of Jackson Hewitt. And then when I sold Jackson Hewitt and started Liberty Tax, he was a director at Liberty Tax. When I was a kid, I fought like cats and dogs with my dad, because he wasn't used to rebellion. He lived his father was Russian, and from Russia, and very, very strict. Well, like you're talking about, dictatorial. Well, he was very dictatorial. So my dad wanted to be dictatorial with me, but he picked the wrong guy. Fought until when I started working full-time at H&R Block, we became best of friends. And for the last 50 years of his life, 45 years of his life, we were close. He was one of my best friends and confidants.
Because you aligned the careers, right? Like, for example, my father, he's also a hard worker, but there was also a distance. It was always a struggle to feed the family, ultimately immigrate to the United States and so on. I got closer with him after I started to have kids, only in the later years. But before that, there was like major distance. So you closed that gap by following the same vertical, being in the same vertical as your father. That kind of brought you together and connect with each other more.
Exactly. We had a lot to talk. And it was the only thing that we ever agreed on was business. On politics, on religion, everything else we couldn't agree. But we agreed on religion.
Awesome. All right. So then Let's shift to business part. I want to make sure that we also cover that part. So I'm very curious about the journey of expansion and how you ultimately decided to franchise. Managing those multiple locations gave you the tools and experience to be open to the idea of expanding on such a level and ultimately take it public.
Exactly. But I took both of my first two companies public. And really the only reason I went public is each time I had investors. And as a private company, investors don't have a great exit strategy. And in both companies, I took private equity, and they were really, after they were in for about 5 years or 6 years, they were looking for their exit strategy. That's the only reason I went public, is to monetize the investment for my investor.
But long term, right? Because private equity would come in only for a certain period of
Yeah,
time and exit.
it's funny with private equity that the first few years, year or two, you're both thinking long term, but they have about a 5-year mentality. And as you get told closer to 5 years, they're thinking of, okay, let's boost this year's profits so they're thinking very selfishly about this year.
To raise the
And
valuation to
so
exit at
it,
highest.
it causes
Oh, wow.
friction eventually. You start on a best of friends, eventually it causes friction.
Yeah, and again, I just want to make sure I understand correctly because boosting that will exit at the highest valuation possible for them, right? So they can
Right.
go back to and return the
Exactly.
funds.
They don't really care about your profits 2 years or 4 years or 6 years from now. Maximize your profit today. Even if it hurts the future, we want you to have a good year now, even at the expense of the future. And so you can become at odds, because as a visionary and a leader of your company, you're always thinking long term. And it doesn't matter what happens this 3 months, what happens is the next 30 years. And so it causes a diversion of interest and a conflict.
So going public, long term investors allows you to scale. Was that the only reason I'm asking? What would be better, right? We hear that the fastest growth, highest possible, it's through merger acquisitions, right? Just get yourself to the point where you can start to scale, then go acquire, and expand that way. Another approach is to open new locations, probably much more pricey because you got to take it off the ground. So I guess in a franchise model, you would be opening new locations. And so you need that funding. Like, I'm trying to understand that part. What was that the only reason to go for the going public, or there's some other things that we should be aware of?
You mean, are you talking about taking investment or?
Taking the investments is for
Right.
scaling, right? Company is
Yeah.
already profitable, you make profits, but you want to scale. Like my dream is to open national brand and have thousands of locations. So I'm just wondering, is it my approach was find a way to, without going through franchise, find investments and expand that way, and
Mhm.
corporate would own everything. So after listening to you, some of your podcasts, and started reading your books, puts me now on the sideline here to decide. Looks like there's a benefit of going franchise as well. So what makes go franchise model versus corporate? Yes, you get that investment, but okay, so why franchise and why not invest and have the corporate own everything?
If you read my book, I made a lot of mistakes. And the second biggest mistake I made was to not franchise initially. And when we started Jackson Hewitt, we bought 6 offices from his widow, and H&R Block had 9,000 offices. So they had 8,994 offices more than we did. But our goal is to be number one and have more offices than H&R Block. So we grew pretty quickly. We bought it in August with 6 locations. By January, we had 11. By the next January, we had 15. And by the third January, 2.5 years later, we had 22. So we went in 2.5 years, we went from 6 to 22. And that sounds good. That's not a bad growth. That's top 2% growth in the country, right? But at that rate, to get to 9,000, it was going to take me 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So I said, what are we going to do different? And so we started franchising. And then we went to 22 to 49, from 49 to 197, 197 to 352. We just grew exponentially. What happens with a franchisee, with there's several beauties of the franchise system. First of all, the most important is this, that when you have corporate employees, and I've seen this in every corporation that I've ever seen, including my own, and even though I recognize it, that less than 5% of the people act like owners, maybe 2% or 3%. When I left Liberty Tech, there's 500 employees, 15 or 20 act like owners. The rest act like employees. But when you get a franchisee, they own it, they act like an owner. So first of all, you get all owners. And secondly, you get people like yourself, or great people who are used to making six figures, who pay you to work for you. Instead of me paying you six figure, you pay me a royalty and a franchise fee to come to work for me. And you're creative, and you offer better customer service. You work harder. You give me great ideas. All of your thinking goes into our model, and we're learning together, because I got another guy that's thinking like an owner, and he's talented. I couldn't afford to pay all these people to work for me, right? But they're paying me to work for me. It's an incredible system. If you get it right, it's an incredible system. And that's how I founded not one, but two companies that were worth, with less than $5 million investment at Jackson Hewitt and $10 million at Liberty, combined $15 million of investment. I created $1.5 billion of public company, $1.5 billion with $15 million. Now, if I had to go raise the money, where would I get all that money in all that time? I could have done it if I had an extra 200 years or 400 years. I could have done it by corporate location, but I don't have all that time. We don't have all that time. So if you want to succeed exponentially, fairly rapidly, use other people's, not only their money, but their thoughts and their labor and their entrepreneurship to build together. It's such a great model.
Didn't think of it from that perspective. That's interesting. What about how you preserved the culture? So I guess you had it at the corporate level, and with all the franchisees, they had to get aligned with, because you probably would not want you would want to probably also pre-qualify them, right? Just because you want to buy a franchise, you do not the right fit for this, because ultimately you're going to represent.
Exactly. And they would mostly sort themselves out if they didn't fit in the culture, right? If they didn't fit, they would sort themselves out. And if they fit, they perform well. And we have minimums that they have to obtain to ensure that they're following the system and participate. But you're right. There's some people that just didn't work out, that you have to push out, or they pull themselves out of the system. And we tried, what we do and have always done is, in many franchise systems, here's an agreement, right? Here's an agreement, sign the agreement, write me a check, and you're a franchise. Well, we don't let you do that. You have to come and spend a whole week with us at training. You have to live with us and spend all day with us, and cocktail party and meetings with us. And if at any point we feel that you're not going to listen and not going to participate and not going to have a bad attitude, then we're going to kick you out. We had two women from Immokalee, Florida. They were in a perfect position. They were in Immokalee, is in the Everglades near Fort Myers. And they were franchised. They worked for a franchisee at H&R Block, and they ran the office themselves. So they had a $200,000 or $300,000 office that they were running, that they were going to leave and become a Jackson Hewitt franchise. And they got and they didn't have a non-compete. They would have gotten all the customers. It was a perfect situation. But at training, my daughter was head of training by then. And at training, they were arguing. That's not the way we do it. I've been in business for 15 years. That's not the way we do it. And so my daughter had to throw him out of training. And it was funny. It's a funny story because she said, the only reason you have your job is you're sleeping with the owner. Because my daughter had a last name. So we didn't advertise she was my daughter, right? So they said, you're sleeping with a CEO, right?
Wow.
But they were so mean to her when, yeah, we owe it to the franchisee to police our system, because when you have between Jackson Hewitt and Liberty, they have 10,000 locations. Whoever offers the worst service in the chain is creating the level of quality. So our franchisees need us to police the system. So we're very aggressive. And in fact, so much so that we do one thing that almost no company does. And that is we call every customer and ask how we did for them. So we check on ourselves, because it doesn't matter if you think you're doing a good job or I think you're doing a good job. It only matters if they think you're doing a good job. So I am so fanatically interested in exceeding customers' expectations. One of my favorite authors, Stan Phelps, wrote a book, and he said, you never show up exactly on time at a meeting or at an event. You're either late or early. No one comes, if the meeting starts at 9, almost no one comes in at exactly 9 o'clock. He said, in the same manner, when you never meet a customer's expectation, you either exceed it or fail to meet it. And so he said, and so my judgment of a customer experience is the only rank. There's all kinds of other people who have all these other rankings. My ranking is percentage of customers that we exceed expectation. That's my ranking on what kind of customer service we offer. So I have my own valuation, and that is each year. And our goal is each year, knowing that we can't exceed everyone's expectation, but every year we need to exceed a higher percentage of customers' expectation. And so we need to police our system to make sure that everyone is committed to that.
Oh, that's amazing lesson. And I can see how this can be applied everywhere pretty much, meaning it's not
Every
just
industry.
customers that, yeah. And not just industry, also not just customers that bring you funds in, but you could treat your vendors, your teammates, your family, everybody is a customer. And I'm asking myself, when was the last time I actually picked up the phone and called someone and asked, how did I do on this?
I'm
Right. So
glad you said,
wow.
that, everyone, because I love our mission statement. I've had mission statements at Block, Jackson Hewitt, and Liberty, and now Loyalty Brand. I love our mission statement, and it's having fun, improving lives. And having fun is, if on Monday morning you're going to work and you're not looking forward to it, you're going to the wrong place, right? You're going to the wrong place, and life's too short. Find somewhere that Monday. So thank God it's Monday. Forget this trash. And
Yes.
thank God it's Friday. Thank God it's Monday. And improving lives, you said it right. It's not just ourselves or our employees or our franchisees or our vendors or our customers. It's everyone around us giving back. Yeah, we want to make the world a better place.
One of the things I guess I'm connecting to that on one of the podcasts you shared that the renewal rate was at 90%, if I'm correct. I guess that's how you maintain such high renewal rate with franchise, right? For those that do not know, just because you got a franchise, it doesn't mean forever. It has a time block that it has to renew, and a franchise location has an option to renew or exit. And because there's so many different franchises, doesn't mean all of them are a major success with that give you all these platforms, systems. A lot of franchise businesses fail. And how do we know they fail? The statistics show that renewals are not happening. So to have such a high renewal rate, that shows that you got that's under your control as well.
Yeah, we keep over 90% of our franchisees each year. And to me, I'd rather keep about 85%. Some of them that are successful, the more of them are happy than successful. And people that don't follow the system, I don't want them around, because they're just they just bring everyone down. And the key to any successful company is having a system that everyone follows, right? And that's, for example, McDonald's. McDonald's isn't the best hamburger. My 10-year-old grandchild could go to the grocery store and buy some hamburger and a bun and some condiments and cook a better quality hamburger than you can get at McDonald's for less price. It's not about the quality of the hamburger. It's about the system, which includes convenience and price and location and the way you treat customers. All of it is part of the system. And if you're not, and I struggle, the number one phrase I use in my whole life is follow the system. And it's so difficult because you would think after this is my 55th tax season, you would think that the people would automatically listen. Most people haven't been in it 55 weeks, let alone 55 months or years, but no one listens 100%. And actually they want to stay around. They love us. They love our system. They love being part of the family. When you talked about culture before, culture is incredibly powerful and important. And people don't understand it. And I learned in 1988, I learned the difference between the leaders at Walmart and the leaders at Kmart. And Walmart is a huge success. Kmart's going down the toilet, but they're same age people. And I wonder back then, what was the difference? Are the people at Walmart smarter or more educated or more experienced? No, you can hire the most experienced or educated or smart. What it is culture. That's a culture, and it's the attitude of the people in the organization. And the culture is an asset that should be on your balance sheet. It's like you have equipment on your balance sheet, cash on your balance sheet. It should say culture.
How aligned everybody and values. What's
Right.
important to the founder, the visionary, the leadership, everything else had to be aligned with that. Otherwise, everybody will be pulling in their own direction and never get anywhere.
Principles, exactly.
Yeah, principles. Wow. John, I know we at the 1 hour mark. I would love to bring you in for another show. There, I would dive right into maybe on more details on, okay, you had 6 locations. What would be the transition, the step, how that worked out for you, what challenges you faced, ultimately, how you got the company to go public.
I'd love to go through that. I'd be happy.
Awesome. Perfect. Then let's stop here. I'm going to post a link to your LinkedIn and to your book and to
Awesome.
your website and the description. Is there anything else you want to share before our next episode?
I'll just say this, that any one of your listeners that would like my book, if they'll send me their address, I'll ship them the book for free.
Awesome. You're very generous.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you. Look forward to the next time.